Okay, privacy. What is privacy? The concept of privacy is developing as the society changes and technologies change. But the basic idea behind privacy is an ability to keep private what you have kept private till now. So, for instance, your mobile number, if you have kept it private, if you have not given out to people, if you have not put that on your Facebook account, that is private. Your nude body, okay? If you have not shown to other people, if you have kept it private to yourself, that is protected by privacy. If you have kept private your race, your nationality, that should also be protected by privacy. Even your face. If you come to school, if you go to work with a face mask on, covering your face, that should also be part of your privacy, or is protected by privacy. What else will be protected by privacy? Recently, New York Times did a story on the tax records of the presidential candidate Trump in the American election. The tax records of Trump, that's also part of his privacy, because he submitted to the government, but he has not shown that to anybody else. On top of that, there is a law prohibiting people from sharing other people's tax records. So that is also part of privacy. Now, there are two different ways of invading or infringing privacy. Is first by intrusion into private domain. Let's say you are carrying a backpack. If someone wants to look at the contents of the backpack and opens it against your will, that is privacy infringement. That's one infringement, but let's say the attacker or the intruder into your backpack took the pictures of what's in your backpack and let's say put on his Facebook account or shared with his friends without getting commitment from his or her friends that the pictures will not be further disseminated, right? If the intruder takes picture and shares with his or her friends without obtaining commitment from the friends that it will not be further disseminated, then that is also privacy infringement. That is second infringement, right? By intruding into someone's private space, there's one infringement there. But by taking things out of that private domain and further disclosing that to other people, that's a second privacy infringement. Both are independent infringements of privacy. They are independent because one does not depend upon the other. New York Times, by publishing the tax records of Donald Trump, what did they do? Intrusion or revelation? I mean, revelation meaning disclosure. Intrusion or disclosure? Which infringement took place there when New York Times published a story on Donald Trump's tax record? Intrusion or disclosure? Anyone? Both? Oh, you didn't read the story. How did New York Times get the tax records? Did they go to Trump's office and pull it out? No. So there was no intrusion by New York Times. Somebody else did. And nobody knows who did it. But it was sent to New York Times in an anonymous email, or anonymous postal mail, right? And New York Times just received that and published it. So there was no intrusion by New York Times, but there was a disclosure. Okay, disclosure of what is clearly private material, right, to the readers of New York Times. So these are revealing, okay. Great, we have a question. Jennifer, where is Jennifer? Okay, what would be the difference between tax avoidance and tax evasion, since the article states that Trump had avoided paying federal income tax for 18 years? Would it still be considered criminally going against the law? That is a tax law question, not a privacy question. But if you read the article, there is no evidence that Trump committed any violation of tax law. He may have, but nobody knows. All we know is that he took a huge loss in 1 year, and that loss washed against any tax liability in the succeeding years, so that he didn't have to pay tax for 18 years. It is a typical tax saving, not evading, tax saving technique. People are just, concerned that whether someone who has used such tax saving technique should be the president of the United States. That's all. No evidence of illegality. The second question, wouldn't that be defamation? Nick, what is Nick? What do you mean by defamation? Explain your theory of defamation.
Because the New York Times posted false information.
Because New York Times...
They posted the fake information about the tax evasion or whatever. It's not 100% fact that he did.
Oh, well, New York Times didn't say, was there any falsity in New York Times reporting?
Well, it's implied because they're such a big company, and since they are a newspaper company, there's a lot of trust in them.
Well, the question is, was there any false information in the New York Times reporting? Right?
Defamation would be false because it's not true or false.
Well, okay. In defamation, you should ask whether there is any false information, right? New York Times just reported, if you read the New York Times article, it does say there is nothing illegal that's done by Trump. There is a sentence, clear sentence. So if you are talking about that possibility, I don't think reasonable people would be led to believe that Trump did anything wrong. It is just information that the voters will find relevant in make their decisions, right? But New York Times didn't say Trump did anything wrong. New York Times just said Trump, used this tax-saving technique for past 18 years. That's all. Now, if it were in Korea, where there is law of truth defamation, some people may claim that's truth defamation, but Korean law also has exception to truthful reporting for the purpose of public interest. And revealing the information that's relevant to a voter's decision at the presidential election, many people will say that is reporting for public interest. So as long as it is true, even under Korean law, I don't think there will be defamation. Okay? All right, so defamation and that's a, okay, we'll get to the question a little bit later. Defamation is lowering of reputation, lowering of likability or reputation of a person by spreading false information about that person. Okay? Privacy, is that the same as defamation? Let's say I've held private the fact that I was a great soccer player when I was in high school. Okay? But for some stupid reason, I'm so ashamed of having been a great soccer player, and I've kept it private. All right? And I just wrote in my diary what I've done in the high school soccer team, and somebody takes away a page from my diary and publishes it. Is that defamation or privacy infringement? Privacy infringement. It's not defamation. Why not? Because the fact that I was a great soccer player will not lower my reputation, will not defame me, will not make me less likable. Even if I don't like the fact that I played soccer well, reasonable people, others, will, if at all, like me more for having been a good soccer player than like me less. Right? So there is no possibility of defamation in spreading some, pleasing facts about other people. Okay? Now, how about forced coming out? Let's say I'm a homosexual and I've held that fact private to me, and somebody else found out that I'm homosexual and just let other people know my sexual identity. Would that be defamation or privacy infringement?
It depends where are you.
Depends on, okay, let's say I am homosexual.
It depends, like if you are in United States or Korea or Russia or somewhere else. Because for example, if you do it in United States, that wouldn't be defamation. But for example, in some
why would be defamation in the U.S.?
Because that wouldn't lower your reputation.
It would not.
Yeah.
Okay, so you will not be defamation in the U.S. That's what you mean. Okay, good. And you are about to talk about other countries.
Let's say, for example, like if you say that in Saudi Arabia, probably you will not get a job, probably you will be against the law and so on.
Perfect. You are a good student. Yes. That is the difference between defamation and privacy. See, in some countries, reasonable people, okay, may still have prejudice against, well, I don't want to say reasonable people, but average people in that society may have prejudice against being homosexual, and they may start discriminating against me for being homosexual, and that lowers my likability in the society. That will be defamation. And at the same time, it will be privacy infringement as well, because it is intrusion into my private information and disclosing to other people, right? So two, violation of privacy right there. Yes, you had the question.
Did you say that the likability of a person is not objective, like subjective?
Sure.
In the United States, although many people may agree with homosexuality, some people may say, "Oh, well, that's wrong." Well, what would you say in that situation? Like, where do you cross the line where it says that has damaged my faith enough to say that's the issue?
I think that is a difficult question. I think that even in the US, there are many fanatics prejudiced against homosexuality, and that will affect the likability of that will affect the homosexual likability. And yes, I think you can make an argument. I'm not saying, I'm not saying what would actually happen in the court. I'm just saying what arguments can be made. The arguments he just made are perfect, right? Whether he's going to win the case, I don't know, right? But using the same arguments, if same thing was said in in different parts of the country, it may turn out differently. Actually, okay. All right. Let me correct what I just said. Now, defamation is lowering of reputation. I'm not going to correct a lot, but defamation is the lowering of your likability, but most of the times by spreading false information, right? So if somebody claims that I'm homosexual when I'm not, right? That will be defamation. That will be defamation for sure. Would that be privacy infringement? No, right? Because now there is no private fact that's being revealed, because it's not a fact. See? So privacy infringement cannot take place together simultaneously with defamation. There was this joke back in 60s, 70s when Korea was under military dictatorship. The president, Park, was suppressing people's voices critical of him and his regime. And somebody wrote on the wall that the president is actually a fool. Would that be privacy infringement, or would that be defamation? The president is a fool. If the president is really a fool, that would be privacy infringement, right? If the president is not a fool, it would be defamation. Okay? So the police back then had to be careful in choosing what crime to charge against that writing on the wall. Okay? Now, there is a narrow set of circumstances where defamation and privacy infringement can take place at the same time. That is when truth defamation applies. So we are talking about, just in Korea, right? In Korea, even revelation of truth, if it's not for public interest, can violate defamation law. So there, truth defamation can take place together with privacy infringement. But things like the presidential candidate's tax records or intellectual capacity of the president, those things will never be considered will always be considered reporting for public interest. So there cannot be truth information, truth defamation concerning the president or other high-level public officials. Okay. Now, okay, there are some questions here. Okay, let's take this. Sonju or Juson. All right. Is it plausible for male students to be criminally prosecuted for privately talking amongst themselves in a private chat room, verbally sexually assaulting other female students? This happened at our school. Okay, is this defamation or privacy infringement? What do you think? There is no privacy infringement because right, they are not talking about any private facts of the female students. Okay? Is there a defamation? Defamation requires a factual assertions, right? So the statements, requires false statements usually, right? But those statements are assertions. Those statements should be assertions of fact, not statements of opinions and feelings, right? So is there any, during the chat, was there any fact asserting statements, right? Things like, she has failed an exam when she actually has passed the exam, right? Or she had cosmetic surgery on her face when she has not, right? If there is such false information, it can be defamation. Also, if there is, even if there is true information, since it is in Korea, it can also be defamation if it lowers likability of female subjects, female students. But the problem with defamation argument is that defamation is lowering reputation, lowering likability among the general public. Okay? If there were only 2 people in the chatting room, right? The message traveled only to that other person. And if there was an implicit promise that people will not relay the contents of the chatting outside the chat room, then whatever they said, whatever they shared within the chat room were supposed to remain in there, so they cannot be held responsible for defamation, because that doesn't concern reputation of the female students among the general student body or general public. Okay? So it is legally difficult. There is I don't know the case that well, but there will be significant legal hurdles in charging defamation, charging the male students with defamation. Okay? All right, next question. Okay, well, shall be and privacy infringement. All right, so we are going into, these are all good questions that lead us to my next topic. Boy, you guys have a lot of questions. Okay. We'll take things in a flow. There are exceptions to privacy infringement, which means there are times that intruding into and disclosing, intruding into private domains and disclosing private material does not constitute privacy infringement. Okay, there are times when, if such intrusion or disclosure is necessary to save people's lives, to protect national security, for a lot of other public interest. And one very important, one prevailing public interest that justifies many privacy infringements is the need for criminal investigation. Okay? One of the most frequent privacy infringements are committed by the police investigating crimes. And they are all forgiven. Okay? They are not sued, they are not punished for other people, for infringing other people's privacy, because they have this overwhelming public interest in criminal investigation. Well, why do they need to do criminal investigations? Well, to protect other people, to protect the society from bad guys. Yeah? So, is there other exceptions to privacy, exceptions to privacy law? Well, Shelby asked the correct question here. Shelby, raise your hand. Okay. So, forceful disclosure of health records of a presidential candidate, can that be justified as protection of security? Well, even if it does not rise to the level of security, I think that it will be justified as it will be justified under people's interest, public interest in fair election. Because people voting for the president of the United States have to have all the information they need to, job performance of the future president. And if health is an important factor in the job performance, they should have it. So if New York Times somehow gets a hold of medical records of Hillary Clinton, and they find something meaningful for the voters that has been hidden from the voters, they will publish it. I think that they will be justified in, I think they will be forgiven. I think they will be justified in that privacy infringement. Okay? By the way, New York Times will not be sued by Trump. Even if it's sued, the lawsuit will be dismissed. There will be no criminal charge against New York Times because of the public interest in running a fair election. A fair election means an election where the voters are not denied access to information vital to their choice. Same thing with this question, Youngwoo. What is Youngwoo? Okay. Financial supervisory services. By the way, they don't routinely check your bank accounts. But there are times they do check it for investigation into possible financial law violations. And they would also be forgiven. Their privacy infringement will also be justified. Why? Because if they have also public interest in, preventing financial crimes, right? Okay. Yes. Well, who makes the decision? Well, if you are talking about legal decision, well, the judges. In the end, it's the judges. I mean, for all legal decisions, it's the judges who have the final say. Ethically, well, anyone can make the decision. All right? So you are asking, if a modicum of, if a very small amount of private information has been leaked, it should not be privacy violation, but who decides whether that leak is small or big, right? That's your question. Yeah. How small a leak are you talking about? How small a leak do you have in mind? Oh, I see. So if a family lineage, right? Well, I think that family lineage is that is a tough issue, because most of the times family lineage is not privately held, right? Because if you go to your family's weddings, family functions, by being there, you already, make public your association with your family to the guest of the wedding ceremonies, right? Or any other family functions where the guests are invited, right? Not just school lineage, not just family lineage. How about the fact that you guys go to school here? Can that be private information? Possibly, but it will be very difficult to keep it private though, right? Because by coming to the school, you will run into hundreds of thousands of students, a number large enough to be called public, right? That's something you should think about. I mean, we're going to come back to this question. That is one of the ethical questions that are looming in the privacy discourse. You know, how about your address, your residential address? Is that private information? But when you go home, you take public roads, you use public transportation, right? So if anyone wants to know where you live, he or she can secretly or openly follow you just by remaining in the public space, right? Within the trains of the subways, on the boardwalks, on the sidewalks. Those are spaces that are open to the public, and people can find out your address wholly remaining on public space, right? Now, how about your mobile phone number? That I'll say it's easily private information, at least more easily than residential address, because mobile phone number, you give out only by, you give out selectively, right? You can avoid giving it out to the general public if you want to, right? You had a question.
Yeah, just all of this, I think it's complicated more though when you're dealing with minors.
Minors.
Yeah, but I'm thinking specifically about, there are a lot of families on YouTube that post daily videos, and a lot of people follow them in their lives. Several of them have very small children. So of course, their kids go to school, and if you really want to find out where they go to school, you can follow them and find out. But I think there's a difference between a small section of people knowing and taking that information and commenting it on YouTube. That's very clearly privacy infringement, even though all they did was follow you in a public way, and anybody can do that.
Sure. So there, again, that's another thorny issue. Information that you put on YouTube or public social media accounts, is that protected by privacy? Most people will say no, but how about the images of children, right? That is a different issue, because the reason we don't recognize privacy in the images that you voluntarily place on your Facebook account is because we think that you gave consent to such disclosure, or you did it yourself, so you consented to your own action. But children, they're not capable of giving legal consent. A lot of laws do not recognize the consent given by minors. That's why every country has an age under which minors cannot have sex, or any sex with a minor will be considered a rape, because minors' consent to such sex will not be considered legal, right? Then if parents put on his Facebook account images or photos of his children, can we say the children consented to the uploading of the photos when they really don't know the world enough to be considered as having given consent to such uploading, right? That is a good argument, and that argument is being constantly made. So for that reason, many people advise others not to upload their children's photos because they may not like it later. Or they don't know enough to like or not like what's being done to their images. Okay. Now, again, coming back to your question, okay, how much leakage is serious enough to be called privacy infringement? That is a valid question, but I think that to address your a better way to think about your question about leakage of a family lineage, right? But still that issue is less about the amount of privacy infringement than about whether it is private information at all, right? Family lineage, the fact of your school enrollment, your residential address. When things are, there are things out in the public, but not quite, right? It's not like, yes, if people want to, they can find about your family lineage, they can find out about where you go to school, and they can even find out where you live, wholly remaining in public space. But we have a sense that that revelation is made only when somebody makes serious efforts to do so, right? So there is a debate whether that is protected by privacy or not. Now, as I said, the most frequent exceptions to privacy law is criminal investigation. And for criminal investigation, they routinely violate your privacy, right? They'll search and seize the contents of your email, right? They'll search and seize your home. They'll search and seize your backpacks to look for evidence of any criminal activity. And if it is for legitimate criminal investigation purpose, it will all be justified. But that's not the end of the story. Because of this concept called presumption of innocence. The people who are not proven guilty, okay, the people who are not proven guilty through a trial should not be punished. Okay? They should be presumed innocent. Right? But if the police come to you, and the police, of course, have not proven that you are guilty. I mean, that's why they are doing the investigation, because they don't know. But without proving your guilt, they are invading your home, invading your backpack, invading into your email account. They are punishing you for being suspicious of having committed a crime. That's a dilemma. Right? I mean, that is violation of the concept of presumption of innocence. Right? But if you just focus on presumption of innocence, then the police cannot do investigation. I mean, the whole reason of doing investigation is to find out whether the person is guilty or not. But if a really guilty person will run away, will lock up the backpack and run away and shut down the email account so that it cannot be searched, right? What do you do? Well, the compromise is what's called warrant. Repeat after me, warrant. It's written there. It's written there, warrant. So that is a special protection for privacy when the state is intruding into your privacy for criminal investigation purposes. Only for criminal investigation purposes. Okay? Intruding into your backpack at the airport, that's not for criminal investigation. All right? That does not require a warrant. If the police come to you for criminal investigation, because you are protected by the presumption of innocence, almost all modern democracies settled on this compromise warrant. What is warrant? Well, some official, independent from the prosecutors and police, who will get promoted for catching as many criminals as possible, right? But these officers are independent from that interest. Okay? These officers will certify in writing that there is a probable cause. What probable cause? Probable cause to believe that crime has happened, and this search and seizure, this investigation will give the police access to incriminating evidence. Okay? So only when those independent officers certify in writing that the investigation will lead to incriminating evidence, then the police can conduct the investigation. That's the warrant doctrine. And we call that written certificate, a warrant. Right? This is a very important doctrine that protects you from that protects your privacy, because most prevalent privacy violations are being committed by the police, but for good reason. But to make sure that it's being committed for good reason, the countries around the world have settled on this system of warrant. Who are those independent officers? Usually judges. Okay? One of the most important roles that judges in any country play is control the police and prosecutors by making sure that privacy infringement take place only when there is probable cause to believe that crime has taken place and the investigation will result in access to incriminating evidence. And to make sure that there is a warrant before investigation takes place, there's another requirement that warrant be presented to the person being investigated. All right? Otherwise, the police can always just do search and seizure, okay? Just do the investigation without warrant and get it later, okay? That should not happen. So another requirement of the warrant doctrine is that the person whose privacy is being infringed should be notified of the fact that his or her privacy is being infringed. And for what reason, right? The reason for the investigation should be also notified. And privacy infringement, and we call all those investigations under one name. That's surveillance. Repeat after me. Surveillance. Okay. And surveillance is intrusion, not disclosure, intrusion, because when the police get the incriminating evidence, they don't publish it, right? They just use it for their own criminal investigation. Now, surveillance is justified when there is warrant. Okay? How about when private parties do it? Can their intrusion also be justified for public interest? Let's say you have a strong belief that your neighbor is a drug seller, and you want to find out to protect your neighborhood. So you go, wiretap your neighbor. Will you be forgiven for doing that? Why not?
Because that's privacy infringement without warrant.
But that's for criminal investigation purposes, right? But you are not the police. The police and prosecutors, they are bound by presumption of innocence because the state has duty to treat its subjects equally and should not discriminate people just for being suspected of a crime, right? But you are a just private individual. You think you have, for some reason, this cavalier sense of civic duty to your neighborhood, and you want to find out yourself, not to charge your neighbor with a crime. It's not criminal investigation, but just to find out, just out of curiosity, okay? And if you find out that your neighbor is a drug seller, yes, you will do something to stop him, but will not go to the police. Yes?
Then if it is allowed, then everybody will enter other people's houses.
Sure. Okay. Yes. Eavesdropping on another person's conversation usually is not forgiven. I have never seen a case where just flat out eavesdropping, just flat out intrusion into other people's privacy has been justified. I've never seen a case. But there are these cases. I didn't give you this, but I will show you right now. Dasnik versus American Broadcasting Company. ABC is a major television network. What's going on here? Okay, anyway, I'll just explain to you in words. Okay, a reporter has heard that an eye clinic, okay, some eye doctors oversubscribe or overdiagnose. You know what's meant by oversubscription and overdiagnose, right? And to find out whether they actually do that, they sent in somebody mocked up as a patient with a camera, secret camera, recording the conversation with the eye doctor, right? And the fake patient even requested service, so he took the camera, again secretly, into the clinic, into the operation room, and he received some operation while the camera was rolling. Now, is that intrusion? Possibly, okay? I mean, clinic is not an open space like your street or buses and trains, okay? It is limited only to the people who are receiving services, right? But the fake patient was not there to receive services. It is somebody that would have been turned away if his or her true purpose was known. Is that privacy infringement? Right? Is that something that should be punished? The court said it should be forgiven because going into the area is something that anybody can do just by arguing, just by stating that he has an eye problem. Okay? So even if there is some fraud involved in obtaining the entry, that entry was something that anybody could obtain. For instance, let's say you go to a restaurant. Let's say you are a restaurant critic. Okay? You are Michelin, or one of the members of the Michelin company, or you are, let's say you are a fashion critic, and you go into boutique shops not to buy, but just to find out what's available. Or you are just ordinary customer, and there are many times you go to pricey department store not to buy, but just to look. But when you go there, you act like you are about to buy something, right? You ask prices. Sometimes you even, when you are about to buy something, you sometimes even lie that you have seen the same product at much cheaper price some other place. Okay? Now, there are all these deceptions, but all those deceptions, do these deceptions make you a trespasser? Do these deceptions make you intruder? Right? On that logic, the court said that type of intrusion should be forgiven. Intrusion for the purpose of public interest, or finding out whether these eye doctors overcharge, overdiagnose, and oversubscribe. But again, that is a limited exception, because if you don't even make efforts of trying to mock up as a patient, if you just attach some wiretapping device in the clinic, in the eye clinic, that would be a privacy infringement that's not forgivable. Okay? All right. We are running out of time fast, but I want to finish this slide. Okay. Now, surveillance. There are several levels. Now, there's a content and there's metadata. Content is like the content of your letter. Metadata is data that's needed to deliver the letter, like the address. And address has to be out in the open, right? So that the post office knows where to deliver. Okay? And also, metadata is information just created as the byproduct of communication. For instance, the stamp, the post stamp on the letter, on the outer envelope, that will be also metadata. And it is inevitably resulted. It is an inevitable byproduct of engaging communication, because the postal system needs those stamps. Okay, they need those stamps to make the proper delivery. Now, which one do you think has more privacy interest? The content of the letter, or what's written on the envelope? Content of the letter. So, depending on what surveillance techniques you use, it is bigger privacy infringement. For instance, one of the revelations of Snowden, Edward Snowden, who has revealed the surveillance, massive surveillance of the American intelligence agencies, especially NSA. It's all in your reading. The reason the NSA has engaged in mass surveillance was because they were just collecting metadata and not the content. Yes, there were programs where they collected content as well, but their main thing was collecting metadata. Basically, who was on the phone with whom, or which phone number was on the phone with which number, when and where, and for how long. That metadata was collected in mass quantities by NSA. And NSA thought that they could do it because it was only metadata. They thought that they should be forgiven for collecting a lot of information because they were just finding out who was talking to, or which number was talking to whom, with which other number, for how long, when, and where. Okay? All right. You had a lot of questions about privacy. I think that we'll have to continue this to the next class. Which worries me about following up with the rest of the semester, but we will manage. We'll manage. So again, read the stuff on privacy. We'll discuss this more next class. And think about ethical questions, and also please read the necessary and proportional principles. That's also the link is also provided on Blackboard. Okay, thank you. And those of you who will show up, at the patent seminar, patent lecture, I'll see you there as well. Thank you.